Hey everyone, if you're feeling like you keep hitting those roadblocks and can't seem to win, well, we're diving into that today.
That's right.
We're exploring this episode from Faith Beans GP podcast. It's called Finding Strength When Life Feels Unwinnable.
Yeah, we're going to unpack why you might feel stuck. We'll hear some real life stories and look at some practical steps, all based on faith to start experiencing those victories again.
I love it. The episode even talks about turning those setbacks, into like setups for a comeback.
Oh, yeah,
I'm so curious to hear how they explain that.
for sure.
But first, let's just tackle those feelings of defeat. Why do we sometimes feel like we just can't win?
Right. What does the podcast tell us?
Yeah.
Well, they outline 3 key reasons. The first is dwelling on those past failures.
Yeah.
Those moments that just keep replaying in our heads.
Yeah.
They actually quote Isaiah 43.18-19 here.
Okay.
It says, "Forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing."
It's interesting because sometimes reflecting on past mistakes, it can be helpful for learning and growth.
Yeah.
But I can see how constantly dwelling on them, it can keep you paralyzed and stuck.
Absolutely.
It's like trying to drive forward, but you're only looking in the rearview mirror.
Haha. Yeah, that's a good analogy.
So what's the second reason that people feel stuck?
Okay, so the second reason is expecting, overnight success. In a world of instant gratification, it's so easy to get discouraged when success doesn't just, poof, appear quickly.
Yeah.
We forget that real growth, it takes time and real consistent effort.
That makes sense. I think we've all fallen into that trap of wanting those instant results.
Right.
And the podcast uses that analogy of a tree to illustrate this, right?
Yeah. They point out that we don't see the roots growing underground, but that unseen growth.
Yeah.
It's essential for the tree to eventually break through the surface.
Oh, I see.
So even when we don't see immediate results, there's still growth happening beneath the surface.
Mm-hmm.
It's preparing us for that breakthrough moment.
So it's about trusting the process.
Yeah.
Recognizing that those unseen efforts are laying the groundwork for something so much bigger.
Exactly.
What about that third reason for feeling stuck?
Third reason they highlight is struggling with self-worth.
Okay.
When you don't believe in yourself, it's really difficult to expect success.
Yeah.
It's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's so true. If you don't believe you're worthy of winning,
Right.
you won't put in the effort or even recognize opportunities when they come knocking.
They reference Proverbs 23.7,
Okay.
which says, "For as he thinks in his heart, so is he." It emphasizes the huge connection between our thoughts and our reality.
So we've got these 3 major roadblocks,
Yeah.
right? Dwelling on the past, expecting that instant success, and struggling with self-worth.
Right.
But how do we actually break free from these feelings?
Yeah. How do we start experiencing those wins? What does the podcast suggest? Well, the podcast kind of shifts gears here and shares these inspiring real-life stories of people who were feeling stuck, but they found ways to, break free, turn things around.
Right.
They demonstrate how these principles play out in, actual people's lives.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Ready to hear about them?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm always eager to hear stories about how people overcome challenges.
Right.
Who's the first person that the podcast features?
The first story is about a young professional named Emily.
Okay.
She had a college degree, but she felt trapped in this dead-end job. And she kept getting rejected, from the job she really wanted,
Oh,
and started to feel like a complete failure.
I think a lot of people can relate to that, hitting a wall in their careers.
Right, especially in a competitive job market.
Yeah. So what was Emily's turning point?
Right, how did she, break free from that cycle of rejection and self-doubt?
Right.
Well, instead of getting discouraged, Emily had this, realization. If things weren't happening for her, maybe they were happening in her.
Okay.
And she decided to use that time to focus on self-improvement.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, she started networking, taking courses, and really honing her skills
Wow.
to prepare herself for, when the right opportunity came along.
So she basically took those rejections as a sign to invest in herself.
Mm-hmm.
She shifted her focus from external validation to internal growth.
Exactly.
I love that.
And it paid off. A year later, she landed her dream job.
Wow.
The podcast uses Emily's story to highlight the lesson from Proverbs 16.3.
Okay.
It says, "Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans."
Yeah. That verse speaks to the importance of aligning your actions with your faith.
Hmm.
It's about trusting that when you put in the effort and commit to your goals,
Yeah,
God will guide your steps and open the right doors at the right time.
I love that.
What about the next story?
Right. Who else do they talk about?
Yeah.
So speaking of shifting mindsets, the podcast tells the story of Jessica,
Okay.
who was trapped in, a cycle of toxic relationships.
Right.
She kept finding herself with partners who, didn't value or respect her.
Ugh, that cycle of heartbreak can be so painful.
Right. And difficult to break.
Yeah. What was Jessica's turning point? How did she finally break free from those unhealthy patterns?
Well, Jessica finally realized she was settling for less than she deserved
Right.
because deep down she didn't believe she was worthy of, true love.
Yeah.
But when she surrendered her heart to God and started setting boundaries in her relationships, everything began to change.
It sounds like she realized that she had the power to choose something different.
Right.
By setting boundaries, she was saying, I deserve to be treated with respect and love.
Exactly. And that shift in her mindset, it had a ripple effect on her life.
Wow.
Within a year of making those changes, she met someone who truly valued and cherished her.
Oh, that's beautiful.
The podcast links Jessica's story to the idea that we don't have to beg for what God freely gives. They even reference Joel 2.25,
Okay.
which talks about God restoring what has been lost.
That's a beautiful reminder that sometimes we block our own blessings by clinging to what's no longer serving us.
Absolutely.
When we let go and surrender to God's plan,
Yeah.
we open ourselves up to receiving the love and abundance that he has for us.
Yes.
So we've heard about Emily finding career success and Jessica discovering healthy love.
Right.
Who's the third person featured in the podcast?
The third story is about James, a business owner who was drowning in debt.
Oh, no.
He was working hard, but no matter what he did, he couldn't seem to get ahead financially.
Yeah.
It felt like he was trapped in this never-ending cycle.
Debt can be such a heavy burden, both financially and emotionally.
For sure.
What steps did James take to turn his situation around?
James decided to turn to his faith for guidance.
Okay.
He started applying biblical principles to his finances.
Okay.
Things like tithing, budgeting, and trusting in God's provision.
So it sounds like he combined practical financial strategies with a deep spiritual trust.
Exactly. And remarkably, within 3 years, he was completely debt-free.
Wow.
The podcast uses James's story to highlight the idea that faith combined with action can lead to incredible breakthroughs.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to finances. They even quote Philippians 4.9, where it says, "And my God will meet all your needs according to his glorious riches in Christ Jesus."
That voice is so powerful. It reminds us that we're not limited by our circumstances.
Right.
When we align our actions with our faith and tap into that source of strength,
Yes,
amazing things can happen.
they really can.
These stories are incredibly inspiring.
Yeah.
They really show that no matter what challenges you're facing, there's always hope for a turnaround.
For sure.
But what are some tangible steps you can take to cultivate that winning mindset?
Right.
What practical advice does the podcast offer?
Well, the podcast introduces 5 daily affirmations that can help you rewire your thinking for success. They suggest repeating these affirmations out loud every day to shift your perspective and create a more positive internal dialogue.
I'm really intrigued by this concept of using affirmations to change your mindset.
Yeah.
It's like you're intentionally planting seeds of positive thinking.
Right.
What are some of the affirmations they recommend?
The first one is, God's plan for me is greater than my past mistakes.
That's a powerful reminder that you are not defined by your past.
Right.
No matter what you've been through, God still has an amazing plan for your life.
Absolutely.
The second one is, I am stepping into my purpose and leaving fear behind.
Yes.
I love how this affirmation emphasizes courage and intention. It's about taking ownership of your journey and moving forward with confidence, even when you're afraid.
Totally.
The third affirmation is, I am not a failure. I am learning, growing, and winning.
I love that one.
That's such a crucial mindset shift. Instead of labeling yourself a failure,
Yeah.
you're reframing those experiences as opportunities for growth and learning.
Yeah.
You're acknowledging that setbacks are a natural part of the journey.
100%.
What are the last two affirmations?
Okay, so the fourth affirmation is, every setback is a setup for my comeback.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's all about perspective.
Right.
Instead of viewing setbacks as defeats, you're choosing to see them as like springboards for something even greater.
Exactly.
What's the fifth and final affirmation?
The fifth affirmation is, victory is my portion, and I walk in it daily.
These affirmations are so empowering.
Aren't they?
They really highlight the importance of choosing faith over fear
Yeah.
and believing in your ability to overcome challenges.
Yes.
But affirmations alone aren't enough, right?
Right.
What about taking action?
Yeah, what practical steps can you take to actually start winning in your life?
Right. It seems like the podcast emphasizes that changing your mindset is just like the foundation.
Yeah, you're right.
What are some action steps they recommend even for actually moving toward those wins?
They outline three key steps to start putting these principles into action.
Okay.
First, you got to embrace that mindset shift.
Yeah.
Winning really does start in your thoughts.
So much of what we achieve or don't achieve comes down to those internal beliefs and the stories we tell ourselves, right?
Totally.
If you believe you can win, you're way more likely to take those risks and put in the effort.
Absolutely. That's the core of it.
Yeah.
And then the second step they highlight is to take those small steps.
Okay.
You don't have to wait for the perfect moment or try to do everything at once.
Right.
Just start taking action, even if it's just something small.
Yeah.
Those small steps build momentum and create a sense of progress. And that can be so motivating.
I love the idea of focusing on progress over perfection.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy to get caught up in wanting to do everything perfectly, but then that leads to procrastination.
Right.
Analysis paralysis. Sometimes just taking imperfect action, it's better than taking no action at all.
Yeah, for sure.
What's the third step the podcast emphasizes?
The third step, maybe the most crucial step, is to trust God's timing. Your season of winning is coming, but it might not happen on your timeline.
Yeah.
This requires patience, faith, and a willingness to surrender to a plan that's, bigger than your own.
That can be tough.
Yeah.
Especially, in a culture that values instant gratification.
Oh, yeah.
But sometimes the waiting, that's where the real growth happens.
Yeah.
It's in those seasons of uncertainty that we learn to lean into our faith and trust that God's working behind the scenes.
Right.
Even when we can't see it. The podcast, they leave you with a powerful verse from Philippians 4:13, right?
Yeah, they end with, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reminder that you don't have to go through this journey alone. You have a source of strength and power to draw upon, no matter what challenges you face.
I think it's so interesting that they chose to end with that particular verse.
Mm-hmm.
It ties everything together, reminding you that, you need to take action and change your mindset.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, your strength and your ability to overcome comes from a higher power.
It makes me think about that concept we talked about earlier about setbacks being setups for comebacks.
Yeah.
What are some ways, you can apply that to your own life right now? How can you reframe those challenges as opportunities, for growth and transformation?
That's a great question to ponder.
Yeah.
I think, it's about recognizing that sometimes those setbacks, they're actually like redirecting you towards something better.
Right.
Something you might not have even imagined for yourself.
Yeah.
Maybe a closed door, it's actually leading you to a path that's more aligned with your purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe a failure is an opportunity to learn a valuable lesson
Right.
that will ultimately lead you to even greater success.
What's so cool here is that the podcast doesn't just offer steps or affirmations.
Right.
It instills a sense of hope and resilience.
Totally.
It reminds you that you're not defined by your defeats. You're in a constant state of transition.
Yeah.
Your breakthroughs are coming.
It's like, you're being invited to shift your perspective.
Yeah.
See yourself as a work in progress, constantly, evolving and growing.
Right.
In that process of growth, those setbacks, they aren't the end of the story. They're just plot twists.
Mm-hmm.
They're adding depth and complexity to your journey.
Exactly. And all of this circles back to those affirmations.
Yeah.
When you start speaking those words of faith and believing in your ability to win, you create a powerful shift within yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You're inviting possibility and opening yourself up to a new way of being in the world.
It's about aligning your thoughts, your words, your actions, with the belief that you're capable of overcoming challenges
Yeah.
and achieving your goals. And that alignment, it creates a ripple effect.
Totally.
Can transform your entire life.
The podcast encourages taking those small steps, even if they seem insignificant. What stands out to you as a small step someone could take today to start feeling like they're winning?
I think a great first step is to choose one of those affirmations that resonates with you
Okay.
and commit to saying it out loud every single day.
Yeah.
It might feel a little awkward at first,
Right.
but over time, those words can start to shift that internal dialogue,
Yeah.
create a more positive self-image.
It's about replacing those negative thoughts with affirmations of truth and possibility.
Yeah.
Maybe another small step could be, identifying one area of your life where you feel stuck
Yeah.
and brainstorming, like just one tiny action you can take today to move forward. It
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
have to be a huge leap, just a little nudge in the right direction.
And it's so important to remember the podcast encourages you to trust God's timing.
Yeah.
You might not see those wins right away,
Yeah.
but if you keep moving forward, if you keep believing, if you keep trusting, that breakthrough will come.
So if you're feeling stuck, defeated, like you just can't win, remember this. You're not alone. There is hope. There is a path to victory.
I love that.
Start by shifting your mindset, taking those small steps, and trusting that your season of winning is on its way.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
You are capable of achieving amazing things. Keep shining, keep believing, and remember, you got this.
It seems like the podcast is really emphasizing that changing your mindset, it's just the foundation.
Right.
And then what are some of those, action steps they recommend for actually like moving toward those wins?
Yeah, because it's one thing to think about it, but what about actually putting it into practice?
Right.
What do they say?
Well, they outline three key steps
Okay.
to start putting these principles, into action.
Okay.
First, you really have to embrace that mindset shift.
Yeah.
Like winning, it really does start in your thoughts.
So much of what we achieve or don't achieve comes down to those internal beliefs
Yeah.
and the stories we tell ourselves.
Totally. If you believe you can win, you're way more likely to take those risks, right? Put in the effort to make it happen.
It makes sense because if you don't believe it, why would you even try?
Exactly. Yeah. And the second step they highlight is to take those small steps.
Okay.
You don't have to wait for the perfect moment or try to do everything at once.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Just start taking action, even if it's something really small.
Yeah.
Those small steps, they build momentum,
Mhm.
They create a sense of progress, and that can be so motivating.
I love that the idea of focusing on progress over perfection, because I think
Oh, yeah.
it's so easy to get caught up in wanting to do everything perfectly,
Yeah.
which then leads to procrastination and being stuck in that analysis paralysis.
Absolutely, yeah. Sometimes just taking imperfect action is better than taking no action at all.
So true.
Yeah.
What's that third step the podcast emphasizes?
The third step, and this is, maybe the most crucial step, is to trust God's timing. Your season of winning is coming, but it might not happen on your timeline.
That's hard,
Right.
especially in a culture that values instant gratification. We want everything right now.
Totally. Yeah, and this requires patience, faith, and a willingness to surrender to a plan that's bigger than your own.
That's a tough one, but I do think that sometimes the waiting, that's where the real growth happens.
Absolutely.
It's in those seasons of uncertainty that we learn to really lean into our faith and trust that God's working behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Even when we can't see it. The podcast, do they leave you with a powerful verse from Philippians?
Yes. They end with, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
It's a good one.
It's a good reminder that you don't have to go through this journey alone. You have a source of strength and power to draw upon, no matter what challenge you're facing.
I find it so fascinating that they chose to end with that particular verse.
Yeah, me too.
It really does tie everything together, reminding you that while you need to, take action and change your mindset,
Right.
ultimately your strength and your ability to overcome, it comes from a higher power.
It makes me think about that concept we talked about earlier about setbacks being setups for comebacks.
Right.
What are some ways, that you can apply that concept to your life right now?
Yeah.
How can you reframe those challenges as opportunities, for growth and transformation?
It's a great question. I think it's about recognizing that sometimes those setbacks, they're actually redirecting you towards something better.
Right.
Yeah, something you might not have even imagined for yourself.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe a closed door. It's actually leading you to a path that's more aligned with your purpose. Or maybe a failure is
Yes.
an opportunity to learn a valuable lesson, and that'll ultimately lead you to greater success.
I think what's so cool here is that the podcast doesn't just offer a set of like steps or affirmations.
Yeah,
It instills a sense of hope and resilience.
totally. And it reminds you that you're not defined by your defeats.
Right.
You're in a constant state of transition.
Your breakthroughs are coming.
I love that. It's like you're being invited to shift your perspective, see yourself as like a work in progress,
Right.
constantly evolving and growing. And that, in that process of growth, the setbacks, they're not the end of the story.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
just like plot twists. They're adding depth and complexity to your journey.
And all of this circles back to those affirmations.
Right.
When you start speaking those words of faith and believing in your ability to win, you create such a powerful shift within yourself.
Right.
You're inviting possibility and opening yourself up to a new way of being in the world.
It's about aligning your thoughts, your words, and your actions with that belief that you're capable,
Yeah.
of overcoming challenges and achieving your goals.
And that alignment creates a ripple effect that can transform your entire life.
It can. It really can.
Yeah. The podcast encourages, taking those small steps, even when they feel insignificant. What stands out to you as a small step someone can take today to start feeling like they're winning again?
I think a great first step is to choose one of those affirmations that really resonated with you
Okay.
and commit to saying it out loud every single day.
Mhm.
It might feel a little awkward at first,
Right.
but over time, those words can start to shift your internal dialogue,
Right.
and create a more positive self-image.
It's about replacing those negative thoughts,
Yeah.
with affirmations of truth and possibility. And maybe another small step could be identifying one area of your life
Yeah.
where you feel really stuck, and then just brainstorming one tiny action you can take today to move forward,
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a huge leap, just a little nudge in the right direction.
Right. And it's so important to remember what the podcast encourages you to do.
Yeah.
Trust God's timing.
Trust God's timing.
You might not see those wins right away,
Right.
but if you keep moving forward, if you keep believing, if you keep trusting, that breakthrough,
Yeah.
it's going to come.
So if you're feeling stuck or defeated, like you just can't win, remember,
Yeah.
you're not alone. There is hope. There's a path to victory.
I love that.
Start by shifting your mindset, taking those small steps, and trusting that your season of winning is on its way.
So well said. You are capable of achieving incredible things. Keep shining, keep believing, and remember, you got this.